was wrong to say. I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause in the story of our lives, the best of times through color glass. Time rolls on enough to let me move on past, but every little now and then it creeps on back to shape my smile.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I'm your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this March 3rd, 2026. Well, whether you like it or not, AI is here, and I think it's here to stay. So we are going to survive, I think, this new technology the best by being aware of it, by starting to discuss how to proceed into this new future. And we begin with this discussion tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new Vestiges After Dark. Once again, I'm your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, here with my co-host, Jamie Wolf.
Good evening, everybody.
And it's been an interesting week, I have to say, with everything going on in the world. And, you know, AI never disappoints. It seems like every day there's a new story about it. And I follow the markets very closely. And that's a big part of the movement in the stock market outside of course, this Iranian invasion. So lots to talk about tonight, at least as it pertains to AI, and that will be coming up in the second hour. This will be one of those episodes where I give you a little bit of a instructive kind of well, it's almost like not really a class, more like a lecture, but it is a opportunity to talk about some of the implications of what this technology means for our future. And then on the third segment, the third hour, we will then discuss and take some of your questions, and the panel will talk about what we learned in the second segment. But that's coming up in the second hour, so please don't miss it. Another announcement here. Once again, TikTok rescinded the live privileges. I don't know what exactly I'm doing wrong. I'm starting to think it has to do with having to go live so many times a month from their studio, not from the simulcaster. I don't think the simulcaster counts anymore. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But I'm getting really kind of tired of trying to figure it out. So I might just let that one lapse, and I'll just keep sending the 1 minute little snippets to TikTok, reminding everybody that they can find us here on Nickelodeon TV on YouTube, because at least it's not a problem anywhere else. It's just right there, right on TikTok, that they have these very strange live restrictions and there's these rules, and I don't have time to be playing content creator every second of the day. I don't, I barely have time for this. But so we're not live on TikTok. Moderators, don't worry about TikTok. Don't try to find us. We're not streaming there. But if I can fix it, I'll fix it. I'm not going to break my back trying to figure it out, though. They can just find us over here. Everyone should just come to YouTube. YouTube's the best place. I know we're on Instagram. I know we're on Facebook. We're even on Twitch, but the place to be is the YouTube channel, Nickelodeon TV. Just go to @Nickelodeon on YouTube, and everything is there. All of our content, even the shorts, those little 1 minute shorts that I've been putting out, everything you can find right here on this channel, including the live mass. If that side of what we do is interesting to you, you can find it there all in one place. You can subscribe and get live notifications when something is going on. Okay. Joining us, of course, from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates tonight. How you doing tonight, Father?
I'm okay, thanks.
Great.
Yeah. Just kind of, I think, as sort of drowning in media coverage as everybody else in the world at the moment. So,
of course, yeah.
Yes, can't get away from it.
No, you can't. You can't. There's never a dull moment right now.
Well, one of the, I mean, I'm very positive about the future with AI. You'll be glad to know. But one of the annoying things, because there's always been annoying things in the world, is that it's now very easy for one person to generate an awful lot of material, audio, visual, written, and there's going to be a short-term period of pain, especially in workplaces and all the rest of it, where until there's a correction, because you just get drowned in all of this AI spam that people are generating to show that they care or they're hardworking or whatever it may be, and so that can get over and done with as soon as bloody possible, as far as I'm concerned. Because I'm sick of reading it.
Yeah, and I think that's actually been going on for a long time too. I mean, I think automated news stories, I think, have been going on even longer than ChatGPT's been out. I think that technology's been influencing social media for a while. I remember even 10 years ago, people saying, "Oh, these are just bots that are responding." Just bots. Like, what bots? How can bots respond? Because back then, I didn't really have a context for these language models that we now take for granted with ChatGPT and Grok and all these other ones.
Well, and politicians are already boring it off. They're so wooden and have just got, cut and paste opinions on everything that when you add AI slot to that, it's just boring. So I'm very positive about the future of AI, but I'm looking forward to that being something that is passe and everyone's sick to death of, and the message is sent, and we just get on with the great things that I think will come with AI.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk about all of that tonight and some more, actually. Also joining us from Tennessee, we have April tonight. How you doing tonight, April?
I'm doing pretty good. I was thinking about this AI that we're going to be talking about tonight, and I'll have to say, to begin with, I was one of the ones that was thinking like Terminator, Skynet.
That would be me.
Yeah.
You're a little blurry tonight, April. Is it your focus, or is it just your camera's just not picking you up?
She asked me earlier if she was blurry. She looked fine, but now that she's up on the bigger screen, there's a little bit of blur there, April. Like you're almost like you're under a filter.
I may have to. It was doing it when I didn't have the filter on. I may have to go out and back in. I don't know.
Okay, if you need to, that will be fine.
But yeah, so now I've kind of gotten where I use AI almost daily, and it's it hasn't come to kill me yet. So
I'm still on the fence.
Yeah.
We'll talk about some of the dangers, some of the risks, some of the benefits. I'm a somewhat more of I take a positive take on it because I see its potential, and I'd see it as just any other powerful tool that we've been given in the world. I mean, I was telling Jamie before the show, people were really afraid of gunpowder at one point, and this is a technology you can do a lot, and you can do a lot of harm with it, and we have done a lot of harm with it. But I don't think anybody wants to give up gunpowder. I mean, particularly Americans, they don't want to give up their guns. To have go back in time to a time when we used swords, I guess, although that would be pretty cool.
I have swords too.
I don't know, but it's like, technology moves us forward, whether we were ready for it or not. And we don't have to necessarily like it. It's just the way that it is. And, we're going to, on the second hour, really get into that in detail. But first, we always begin the show with questions from the ether. These are questions that have come in, usually recently, within the last week or so, that we try to answer in more complete ways. And tonight, I think we have the correct questions. These are the ones from that you had set for last week that we're going to do this week. So I believe I have the correct set in front of me, April. So whenever you're ready, we can begin.
Okay, so the first question it asks, am I correct in assuming that the prohibition or calling for the death of sorceresses in Exodus 22:18 wasn't a blanket statement of witchcraft, but rather those who partook in harmful ritualistic practices that society blamed for death, disease, and so on.
Well, yes, largely that is true. The Hebrew word that's used in that context for sorceress, and I might butcher this, I'll try to pronounce it correctly, is mekashefa. Mekashefa, I believe is how you say it, mekashefa. And what it means is one who manipulates occult forces to cause harm. Usually this was done by means of necromancy. Yeah. So most of the time when you see the word sorceress or sorcerer or witchcraft or witch, it's usually referring to some type of occult practice that involves the conjuring of the dead to carry out the will of the person casting the spell or conducting the ritual. That is the typical way of approaching this. Now, because we don't generally, most people that are talking about the Bible these days, or at least the new, at least Christians, do not speak Hebrew, unfortunately. And so they don't necessarily understand the nuance of Hebrew any better than they understand the nuance of Greek, for example. So the same kind of translation problems happen in the New Testament with the Greek, where a lot of the contextual meaning is lost when it's translated into a common language. Perhaps this is one notch in the belt of the Roman Catholic Church for not putting the Bible into the vernacular for so long, for fear that this very thing could happen, that it would be very difficult for people to always understand without the necessary scholarship to be able to truly understand the context. So it wasn't as though they were keeping it in Greek, Hebrew, and Latin because they wanted to, only educated people to read it, although that's how it's been accused in time. I don't think it had really to do with that as much as it had to do with keeping it secure so that people couldn't misunderstand it and it could cause harm if they did. I mean, that's perhaps maybe a bit naive of me to say, but I try to look at the best of situations instead of always being pessimistic and skeptical of people's intentions. And so, yeah, maybe there were some bad actors in the church that thought that this was a power play, but I don't think that was really the true intent. But this is an example of one where it is an issue, because if you understand the Hebrew, you realize it's not just talking about witches, like Wiccans, like we have today, people that, maybe practice some kind of neo-paganism. It's really very much talking about a very specific kind of action by a very specific kind of person. And in Scripture, the abomination that's usually applied to these kinds of occult practices is almost always related to necromancy, because again, think about the Jewish culture. There's a lot of prohibition around the dead or interacting with the dead, being unclean by dealing with dead bodies, going through cemeteries, that type of thing. So any kind of occult practice would also be equally as unclean on the same basis that you're having to go through the dead in order to carry out whatever it is you're trying to do. And that's how a lot of things were understood. A lot of magical things were understood to have to go through or peel through the dead. This is a very shamanic idea, honestly. So I think it's a carryover from more primitive types of religions, and it gets carried into the cultural memory of a people. So, we come from animists, essentially. All religions started out more like animism, and then it evolved into various tribal systems of shamanism into the more sophisticated religions that we now recognize today, like Judaism and Christianity. So, the ancient Israelites would have had this understanding that, because shamanic understanding is that in order to get things done, you have to have a relationship with the ancestors. The ancestors, of course, are the dead. And this would be problematic from this point of view. And so any divination came from the dead. Even ancient Chinese saw it the same way. You can look at ancient Chinese iconography of the I Ching, which is an ancient Chinese oracle divination system, still very much in use today. One of my favorites, actually. And the scrolls will show these images of people conducting a reading with the I Ching, and then there be the spirits of the ancestors above them looking down to aid them in gaining the knowledge that they seek. So it was very much understood in ancient times that any kind of spell, any kind of divination, any kind of magical operation involved appealing to the dead, the spirits of the dead. And we're not talking about asking the intercession of saints here. We're talking about literally going to dead people to make them unrested, to unrest the dead, to aid you in a particular operation. That's what's really being prohibited here. It's not generalized divination. It's not even generalized witchcraft, although I don't think they would have been terribly tolerant of those things either, although the Jews did have a type of divination that was acceptable. And we've talked about that before. So yeah, this particular word is very specific. It does not come across as specific in English, which is the problem. And yes, you do have Protestant and evangelical ministers condemning, people that practice Wicca, as being of the devil now because they think that the Bible condemns everything of what they do. And the Bible's really specifically condemning a type of very specific necromancy, okay? Or maybe any kind of necromancy would have, because it's unclean. It's ritually unclean to interact with the dead, even in this way. Not just the bodies, even with just talking to them. You're supposed to leave them alone. You're not supposed to interact with them. And, even from a paranormal perspective, when people have a haunted house that's genuine, nobody really does well in those situations. We're really not aligned to be constantly interacting with the dead. It's not healthy for us vibrationally. It's not healthy for us spiritually and here theologically. Okay. So Father Chris, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
No, not really. I mean, other than the sort of regular pain of especially people who are sort of bibliolatrists just picking out random lines from the scriptures that chime with whatever they want to talk about.
Oh,
and then,
yeah.
Always in English too.
Always.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make just a very brief, you'll know this very obviously, theological point, which is that, there's sort of two ways to interpret the scriptures. Well, there's more than two main categories that people fall into. Now, neither of these are forbidden, but only one is authoritative. So one is to get into the text and to try and comprehend what the text meant in the context, which is largely impossible but still worth doing, which is what you were just doing then with the portion about necromancy. That's called exegesis. Okay, so in other words, we begin with the text and then we explore everything we can possibly know about that text, which is not just trying to attempt to get to the context of when it was first written, but also how that's interacted with the church throughout the ages, with scholars, with deep thinkers. That's the only authoritative approach to reading the scriptures. Now, there's another way of reading the scriptures, which is not forbidden. In fact, I encourage people to do it, which we call eisegesis. In other words, you're reading yourself into it. Now, the positive version of this is lectio divina. So you place yourself in the gospel passages, especially you try and imagine yourself as one of the characters in the various pericopes of the stories of the life of Jesus. These are perfectly good spiritual exercises to do, but they're not then to be made authoritative, or I had this experience when I imagined I was St. Peter and therefore God is now telling you this. No. So the former is what the church does in terms of public preaching, in making the people within the church or responsible biblical exegetes. That's what they do. And you can speak with some authority because using the authority of the entire revelation of God through time, through the church. That's great. Personal revelation is personal. And normally speak to your priest about it before you share it with other people, really. Because a personal revelation is just that. It's personal and not to be spread across as a general rule for everybody.
Well said. Well said. April, are you satisfied with that answer? Or is there anything else you'd like to add to it?
I think that answers it pretty well.
Okay. All right, let's move to the next one then.
So the next question is, I am going through the archives and just did the law of words. It got me thinking about people's fear of Zozo, the Ouija board demon. Does that fear of that name give it power? Like Voldemort in Harry Potter, people are afraid to say the name. They are also afraid to say the Ouija board demon's name.
Okay, so we're talking about the laws of magic. This is magic with a K, and kind of a good following from the last question, I guess. Although the laws of magic are not necessarily about how to perform magical operations in an occult sense. We're definitely not talking about stage magicians like in Las Vegas. We're talking about the internal processes, the metaphysics of how the will of a human being can be used to effectuate change in the phenomenal world is essentially what magic is. And so these laws that are being referenced here, and this is your question, April, this was one of yours. I'm going through. You said you're going through the archives of the webinar that I teach, and we had a whole section on the laws of magic. So this was based on Bill Whitcomb's The Magician's Companion, which is an excellent guide to understanding symbology, occult symbology, and how
Very
it applies.
thorough.
Yeah, it is.
It's a reference book.
It is. So I want to read the law of words so that everybody knows what we're actually talking about, since this is a kind of a specialized question that I don't think anyone's going to understand without this one. So the law of words, or also the law of words, symbols of power, is as follows. There are, and I'm reading directly from Bill Whitcomb here. So there are words, symbols that are able to change the inner and or outer realities of those using or perceiving them. These words or symbols do not necessarily need to be consciously understood by those using, perceiving them in order to have their effect. One view is that these words or symbols have accumulated power through use, attention, over thousands of years. Others would say that there is an intrinsic primordial connection or resonance between these words and symbols and the forces or concepts they represent that goes beyond human design. Many people believe this about Sanskrit, claiming that it is the original root language of humanity. So that's the law of words. So I would say that any strong emotion, okay, anytime emotion is invested into something, it's always going to strengthen an entity that is aligned to the strong emotion being offered. This is one of the problems with paranormal investigators, okay? A lot of people are thrill seekers, all right? And they're not necessarily always the best people. And what I mean by the best people is that they're oftentimes not people that have a spiritual center. They're just looking for thrills.
Self-gratification.
Exactly. So what kind of energy do you think that's going to attract? Well, like attracts like. That's one of the basic laws of the occult. And it's a very true law, honestly. And so what you put out there is kind of what you get back. You know, it's kind of a karmic law in a way. And so when you put out a lot of that sort of self-gratification energy, well, then self-gratifying incorporeal forces sort of find you and then have their way with you this time. Then they wonder why they have an attachment down the road. And it's like, well, I mean, I took precautions. I did. Yeah, sure you did. I'm sorry. Burning your sage is not going to protect you from this. Okay. And in this context, the context of the Ouija board, merely giving attention to something over thousands of years is enough. So, you know, we've had discussions about Zozo before on this show. And, you know, we've talked about the Ouija board before. And there are instances of Zozo going back, you know, even thousands of years.
Our friend Darren Evans is a researcher in the Zozo phenomenon, and he's found references to Zozo going BC. So it's been around for thousands of years, so it still garners that power every time it comes up on the board.
It does. But so the thing is that's important here is that words of power is not really the law that applies as much to this question as is the law of magical names, okay? Because in magic, to name something, is to be that something. The name is equivalent to the thing itself in magical terms. This is why it is important in exorcism, and the church knows this, it just doesn't talk about it in these kinds of occult ways, but the first step towards getting control over the situation in an exorcism is to have the demon reveal its name. That's the first point of weakening it, because now you have a symbol, an incorporeal thing that you can now take control of in order to help effectuate the response. It weakens the thing. So let me read you the law of magical names, which incidentally is the next one. In magical systems, a name is the thing that is named. This is to say that in some way, there is an analogical correspondence between the name and the thing named. There is a connection created by shared structure. To know the true name of a person, place, or thing is to have complete control over it. Of course, you could never command something to do anything which was not in its nature. To know a thing's true name is to know its nature. What most people consider to be a name is really, in the magical sense, only a label. So the point is that when we say that we have a name and we have control over an entity, well, what is an entity? An entity is nothing. It's an identity that does not really exist, just like you. You really don't have any substance. You have a concept of what you think you are, but what exactly builds the idea of that concept? It's your nature that builds it. So when you think about someone, you don't just have a name and you're like, okay, well, I know Brian. What do you think when you think of Bishop Bryan? Well, you think of what he does. You think about what kind of behavior he exhibits, what kinds of things that he does, and this exhibits his nature, right? Okay, and then so therefore you know me by that example, but there's no identity there. It's just a construct of instinct, and it's a construct of nature built together into what we interpret to be a person or an identity. A personhood is really what I'm trying to say. So to have the name of something is to actually be able to understand its nature, which gives you some semblance of control over it. However, not enough control to make it do something that's not in its nature. So if I were, let's say, well, let's take it off of me. If we were to conjure a spirit of some kind, and it's a benevolent spirit, well, you could not use that spirit to cause harm to another individual, because it's not in its nature to cause harm. This is why, in order to conduct black magic, in order to really effectuate an actual curse that works, you need to actually appeal to demonic energy, because they're the only ones that within its nature are capable of harming something. You have to go with that. That's what makes it dangerous. But if you can control them to harm someone else, well, as soon as you lose control of them, well, then they will probably come and harm you. So there's a price you pay for that kind of activity. If that's something that you end up finding yourself in, well, now you know why it's a problem. So it's really more about the law of magical names when it comes to Ouija boards, because Zozo, at least in the sense of Zozo, is that name has become, has been identified as a type of nature. And it's an evil nature. I mean, it always manifests in some kind of demonic sense. So therefore, when people are going out of their way to try to communicate with this thing, it doesn't even matter if it's imaginary. And so I know there's people out there like, oh, Ouija boards are just load of crap. It's just a board game. And maybe so. Okay, that's fine. I'm willing to concede that. I mean, it's definitely sold as a board game. But the fact is, it doesn't matter if it's a board game. What matters is if people have inserted, and this is where the first law comes in, and this is the part that does apply, April, is that the law of words gives us the ability to imprint a concept emotionally into it. And so if there has been years, if not thousands of years of energy imprinted into this thing that's now called Zozo, that's based on fear and evil, well, then the very name itself becomes the very instinct, the very nature of fear and evil. And that's what comes through on the Ouija board, whether they're playing it as a game or whether they're actually intending to use it like a witch might because they truly believe that they can communicate. It doesn't matter which one. They both work. That's the problem. And remember what it said in the first law there, that it doesn't matter if the person actually understands what it is, as long as this is what has been established emotionally over the course of thousands of years, that's what is. So it doesn't matter if you know it. Your intention is not that important, okay? And your sentience is not as intrinsic to whether or not this thing can affect you. So you can go completely unconscious and not even realize that this is affecting you in a negative way. And so this is the real problem, the real risk with Ouija boards, because it doesn't matter if it's a game. It's been imprinted with energy of people using it in the real context. And that has given it a nature of its own, that anybody that buys and uses one will interact with that nature now. And that's the power of magic, because that's what it is. It's all magic is. It's not rituals, although it involves that. It's not, using the occult, although it involves that. What it is the base nature of humanity, which is the creative principle. We were made in God's image. God's a creator, so therefore we are too. We can direct our will in the same way God does. The only difference is we do so very imperfectly. God doesn't. And that imperfectness, that imperfect nature makes a lot of mistakes when it starts using occult forces. So it's not, you might say, well, why does God allow it to happen if we're not supposed to do it? Because the answer to that is the prohibition is not against you using occult forces. It's simply the fact that you're not qualified. You're not good enough at it. You're not perfect enough to do it. Only God is. And you could generalize that out to the angels as well, because they can use these forces perfectly, and they can only really be used safely if they're done in a perfect way, which is why it's not safe to play with witchcraft and magic. And this is why the church prohibits it. And it's not because it wants to be controlling, and it's not because it's like, oh, it's evil, it's of the devil. No, it's so easy to get wrong. And there's no reason to do it, because the church is not here to teach you how to understand the occult. The church is here to teach you how to attain salvation. And this is just going to further complicate it. So why would it teach something that's going to make it harder than it already is?
Well, and using these invocations through a Ouija board down here on Earth, how many people say they've talked to an angel through a Ouija board? You're not. It's going to be more demonic or lower vibration forces, because that's where we're at.
Exactly. Well said. Look, the church, the catechism, scripture itself has a lot of these rules and regulations regarding this kind of stuff. And I think people just take that as control tactics. It's really not. It's really about protection. Now, maybe that protection goes too far by, making you feel guilty for doing it. I mean, that is one of the tactics the church has used. And maybe that's not the most effective way to understanding it. However, that doesn't negate the fact that ultimately the intention of the church is to protect you from, the misuse of this extreme power. Because, see, we're fallen. We're not cut off. All right. It's not like we were created by God and now we're completely cut off and now we don't have any access to these cosmic forces. Well, the cosmic forces we originally were designed to have control of by being literally made in his image have gone nowhere. We still have that connection. That never left us. What changed was that now we cannot interact with those forces perfectly. That's the risk. So there are some safeguards in place, and we call that in the occult the psychic sensor. Okay. The church might call it man's conscience. They're kind of the same thing. But the fact is, we've been given a safe space here on earth to be able to operate largely without the knowledge of all of these occult forces floating around, so that we can focus on getting perfected, to be corrected enough to be able to then reassume our place within the kingdom of heaven, so that we can then return to mastery of these things. And
our fallen nature is naturally going to attract other things that are fallen to us. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's a whole lot easier to have communication with something that's fallen than it is something that is not.
It is.
Because we're broken.
It is. Father Chris, I know this is more of a occult question, more of an esoteric question, but I don't know if there's any kind of theological input you'd like to maybe contribute to this one.
Yeah, I think so. Although I'll just quickly respond to what Jamie said, because she's dead right. And because there's also the principle of, a drowning man will drown you.
Like attracts like.
Yeah,
Even if it's not good.
Dark forces that are destined for perdition will cling on to you because you're not dead. Anyway, but no, I was gonna talk about names, really, the power of names. It's where we began with, and the scriptures have a lot to say about names. We have Adam and Eve, man and woman, and Adam is charged with naming the animals, right? With naming what is created matter. And then we have we can't go through them all, but when Moses, when God appears to Moses in the burning bush, Moses asks the perfectly sensible question. Okay, who am I going to say has sent me to tell them this? and the answer is, I am who is.
Yeah.
I am being itself. So the name of God is kind of elusive. The name of God, the Hebrew version of that is not said in synagogues. Christians don't have this prohibition, but there's when they say Adonai in the synagogues when they're reading the Torah, that means Lord, and in most translations of the Bible for Christians, we say Lord with capital letters, but it's actually this other name which means I am who is. And then we have this name Jesus, Savior, and in the opening chapter of the Gospel of Mark, one of the first things Jesus does is an exorcism, and the demons say, "I know who you are, the Holy One of God." And Jesus commands them to be silent because them naming him would be an act of authority. To know somebody's name is to have authority over them as well. Jamie and I know about that. If you know somebody's name who's a criminal and they start running away, you say, I don't know why you're running away. I know who you are.
Yeah, I don't know why you're running away, John. And they'll almost always hesitate, like, oh, crap, that's right. They know who I am.
I mean, identification is the first thing you get from someone, right? I mean,
And it's a shame that in today's society, we don't name our kids properly anymore. You just pick a name you like from a celebrity and give it to your kid, but their names are supposed to have a lot more power.
Well, they all mean something, but nobody knows what their name means anymore,
I know what my name means.
Well, but you're different.
But so names are really significant in the scriptures. I mean, I know it's kind of become a joke, the sort of those sort of prologues, somebody begat them and begat the other, and if that's all we read at church, then we'd probably be fairly dry. But actually, they are well worth looking at, the genealogies that are set out there. And people today have this instinct. I mean, Ancestry.com makes a lot of money. I'm not sponsored by them. I use a different one, but they're the most well-known one. People want to know the names of their ancestors, and so names are really, really significant and well worth. Sorry, my computer decided to put my hand up. I don't know why.
Yeah, I saw that. You may speak, Father. You may speak.
Ahead, you have the floor.
I think Zozo was trying to get a hand in, but So I don't fear things like that. I don't fear ghoulish names like that because I don't afford them any power. And you're right. I mean, even in a minor exorcism, and you could consider simply praying to God for help to be a form of minor exorcism. That's essentially what it is.
Sure.
What you're really doing is you're appealing to the name that's above all names. That's also from the scriptures.
Well, I mean, let's not forget the fact that the entire Western mystery tradition from which all occult knowledge comes from really originated with Jewish mysticism. I mean, it really did. So it's not surprising that so much of this has its reflection in scripture because that's really where it started. That's its origin point in a lot of ways. So it doesn't surprise me that names are important, of course, in the Bible because this is where we get this in the later, Western tradition of Kabbalah, and then, of course, how it continues on. So yeah, I mean, this is what we have to keep in mind. But you did say one thing I want to add to this before we move to the next question, is that Father Chris mentioned how he doesn't give any power to Zozo. He doesn't give it fear. And that's what I've said to a lot of you. And it's like as soon as you fear the devil, well, now you've given him power over you. The point is, the devil, demonic forces, evil itself is not a real thing. We make it real by investing emotional energy into it. So as soon as you fear a thing, now that thing has been given power over you. So even though I have said, that you don't need to necessarily believe that Ouija boards work for them to work, and you don't necessarily have to believe that Zozo is a real thing for Zozo to be a real thing. But the fact is, you don't have to give it any energy either. So if you do find yourself, or having had foolishly played with a Ouija board and tried to conjure Zozo for a conversation, and now you're having problems, well, stop feeding it and it will go away.
I've said this over and over again. You've got to stop pretending you're a victim. If you're a victim of something horrible, take it, learn from it, and move on. I get angry sometimes with people that are like, well, I would do that, but my anxiety, my fear, my doubts, my this, my that. You're giving it power. Stop giving it power. If you're a victim of something, or if you have an ailment, acknowledge it and then try to move past it. My God, if I would have just laid in a hospital bed and had a pity party, I never would have walked again. You have to take hold of that. Quit giving these negative things energy. Every time I hear somebody say, well, my anxiety, my ADHD, my this, my that. Okay, I understand. You've got some issues. What are you going to do about it?
When you start to take responsibility, and look, everybody's given a different lot in life, right? There's some people that have different talents than others.
Yeah,
There's some people
some of us will struggle more than others.
Yeah, there's some people that have better luck. I mean, I don't call it luck. I mean, but it is ultimately luck from our perspective. And so some people will have an easier time than others, but that is not an excuse to fall into a victim mentality, which is just going to compound your problems.
Yeah.
That's just never going to be the right way to go. I want to just add,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I look, and actually you could use this for anxiety and for all those other normal things in life. But, the late Vatican exorcist, before he did every exorcism, used to thumb his nose at the devil.
Oh, Armroth? Gabriel Armroth?
Yeah.
Funny guy.
Yeah.
and I love that principle. Yeah, actually, there was a documentary on Netflix about him, which was good. He was in it, before he died, and he was such a gentle, spirit. He had such a ready sense of humor. You read his books and you think, gosh, he must be really serious, but he was not serious at all. I mean, he was serious about his work.
He was a jokester.
He had a really light, humorous touch, and I think. That thumbing his nose at the devil was that essentially he's saying, "I'm giving you no power. I'm going to mock you, but not an empty mockery. I can mock you because I know who governs you." And I think that's a good thing to do for any kind of psychological issue you've got. You think, "Oh, my anxiety is stopping me from leaving the house." Give it that. I
agree.
I'm not being simplistic.
It's not a cut and dry thing. It can take time, but the more you take responsibility for it, the more you take your power back.
It's a mentality thing. It's a mentality and you can't just change your mentality overnight.
It's not easy. I'm not saying anybody suffering from conditions or you're not strong enough or you're weak. No, it's a struggle. It's a lifelong struggle. That's where you've got to identify the problem and then you start to work against it, and then before you know it, you'll feel like you have power over your problems again.
Well said. So now Shelley Baker on Facebook